Today we are going to learn about tragedy, its origin, explanation, about Aristotle's concept of tragedy, and about Oedipus, specifically Oedipus Rex as a tragedy. Let us first understand the general view. Tragedy is a branch of drama that treats in a serious and dignified style the sorrowful or terrible events caused by a heroic individual. If we sincerely look at this paragraph, we will find significant points like that it is a branch of drama and it treats a serious and dignified style, so it has seriousness and a dignified style. There must have a sorrowful or terrible events caused by a heroic individual, so there must be a heroic individual, someone who can be a hero or a heroine, and because of him or her this sorrowful event or terrible event will occur. Although the word tragedy is often used loosely to describe any sort of disaster or misfortune, it more precisely refers to a work of art that probes with high seriousness questions concerning the role of man in the universe. You need not follow the whole paragraph, just come to the last point, the role of man in the universe. So this is something important regarding tragedy. In order to understand tragedy better, we have to understand that this particular piece of work of art, literature, focuses the role of man in the universe, and it questions regarding the role of man in the universe. Now, what are the points to remember regarding tragedy, specifically about its origin? The Greeks of Attica, the ancient state whose chief city was Athens, first used the word in the 5th century BC to describe a specific kind of play which was presented at festivals in Greece. There is nothing that you cannot understand. Every line, every word is simple and general, so there must not be any every line and word are very simple, so there must not be any difficulty in understanding the paragraph. Sponsored by the local governments, these plays were attended by the entire community, a small admission fee being provided by the state for those who could not afford it themselves. So there was still this small admission fee was being provided by the state, because people, there will be people, or there were people who were not rich enough to enjoy a tragedy. So state helped them by providing a small admission fee. The atmosphere surrounding the performances was more like that of a religious ceremony than entertainment. So it was more like a religious ceremony, not simple entertainment. There were altars to the gods with priests in attendance. The subjects of the tragedies were the misfortunes of the heroes of legend, religious myth, and history. So this point is important. Subjects of the tragedies were the misfortunes of the heroes, and heroes from legend, heroes from the religious myth, and heroes from history. So these were the subjects of the tragedies. Now let us talk about the source and the dramatists. Most of the material was derived from the works of Homer and was common knowledge in the Greek communities. So powerful were the achievements of three greatest Greek dramatists. Now, basic source was Homer, and the Greek communities were providing enough materials for the tragedy writers. Those tragedians, specifically these three, who were the most successful tragedians and important too, they took their references, materials from Homer and the knowledge, common knowledge in the Greek communities. Now, those three greatest Greek dramatists were Aeschylus, 525 to 456 BCE, Sophocles, 496 to 406 BCE, and Euripides, 480 to 406 BCE. Now, etymology. Etymology means from where exactly the tragedy, the word tragedy, comes. The most generally accepted source is the Greek tragoidia, or goat song. From tragos, goat, and aidien, to sing. That means tragos means goat and aidien means to sing. The word could have referred either to the prize, a goat, that was awarded to the dramatists whose plays won the earliest competitions, or to the dress, goatskins, dress means the goatskins, dress made by goatskins of the performers, or to the goat that was sacrificed in the rituals from which tragedy developed. Basically, you need to focus here that tragos or aidien, so goat song. And goat was successfully an important part in the whole ceremony and in the writing of a tragedy, because you see the dramatists were awarded by the goat or the goat skins, and the goat which was sacrificed in the rituals from which tragedy developed. Choric dance and second character. In these communal celebrations, a choric dance may have been the first formal element and perhaps for centuries was the principal element. A speaker was later introduced into the ritual, in all likelihood as an extension of the role of the priest, and dialogue was established between him and the dancers, who became the chorus in the Athenian drama. So this is where you can find the presence of the chorus in the drama. So how did actually chorus come into the play? How was chorus invented into the play? From this paragraph it becomes clear. Aeschylus is usually regarded as the one who, realizing the dramatic possibilities of the dialogue, first added a second speaker and thus invented the form of tragedy. So there was a second speaker in Aeschylean tragedies, and because of the second speaker, dialogue was formed very intentionally. Dionysian feasts and universal elements of tragedy. So what is exactly Dionysian feasts? And then following the universal elements of tragedy. 4 Dionysia or Bacchanalia, feasts of the Greek god Dionysius. So feasts of Dionysius are called Dionysia or Bacchanalia, from Bacchus, were held annually in Athens. Since Dionysus once held place as the god of vegetation, so if you have any doubt who was Dionysus, so this is the answer, the god of the vegetation and the vine, vine means wine, and the goat was believed sacred to him, it has been guessed that tragedy originated in fertility feasts to commemorate the harvest and the vintage and the associated ideas of the death and renewal of life. Whatever the original religious connections of tragedy may have been, 2 elements have never entirely been lost. First, its high seriousness, befitting matters in which survival is an art, is at issue, and second, its involvement of the entire community in matters of ultimate and common concern. So basically there were 2 basic features that were not lost. One is the high seriousness. Second is the involvement of the entire community in the matters of ultimate and common concern. So entire community was involved into the matters. These are the 2 factors. So 4 Dionysia is here, Dionysian feasts, and the universal elements of tragedy. These are 2 universal elements of tragedy. Now let us talk about Aeschylus, the first great tragedian. Aeschylus has been called the most theological of the Greek tragedians. His 2 most famous works are Oresteia, a trilogy. Trilogy means comprising 3 dramas, 3 plays, 3 tragedies into one, comprising Agamemnon, Kiepheri, and Eumenides. So the Oresteia, that means the first work of art, first tragedy, the collection of 3 tragedies, Oresteia, comprises 3 separate tragedies. One is Agamemnon, second is Kiepheri, third Eumenides. Except Oresteia, there is another one, Prometheus Bound, the first part of a trilogy of which the last 2 parts have been lost. So even this one, another trilogy, just like Aristotle, but the first part, Prometheus Bound, was found, and the last two parts have been lost. His Prometheus has been compared to the book of Job of the Bible, both in its structure, that is the immobilized heroic figure maintaining his cause in dialogues with visitors, and in its preoccupation with the problem of suffering at the hands of a seemingly unjust deity. If you don't understand this part, it doesn't really matter. Okay, this is your part to understand. However, let me discuss a bit about it. So book of Job was taken from the Bible, and both Prometheus and book of Job are similar in this case in its structure. The immobilized heroic figure, so the heroic figure must not be mobilized. He's fixed, standing alone, standing fixed, firm, maintaining his cause. His cause was maintained by the heroic figure in dialogues with visitors. Whoever is coming, he is maintaining a dialogue. In both cases, book of Job and Prometheus, the same thing happened. And it is preoccupation with the problem of suffering at the hands of a seemingly unjust deity. So someone is torturing the hero, unjust deity, and he is giving tasks after tasks, probably just like Hercules was facing the challenges of Zeus in order to make a peace with Hera. Something similar like that happened in both Prometheus and the book of Job. Now, coming to the second dramatist, who was called Sophocles, the purest artist. Sophocles has been called the great mediating figure between Aeschylus and Euripides. Of the three, it might be said that Aeschylus tended to resolve tragic tensions into higher truth, to look beyond or above tragedy, that Euripides' irony and bitterness led him the other way, to fix on the disintegration of the individual, and that Sophocles, who is often called the purest artist of the three, was truest to the actual state of human experience. Unlike the others, Sophocles seems never to insinuate himself into his characters or situations, never to manipulate them into preconceived patterns. He sets them free on a course seemingly of their own choosing. He neither preaches nor rails. So what we get here in this paragraph that about Sophocles, the Sophocles was not like Aeschylus, neither like Euripides, because his idea was to create a free character, and he was not always present in his characters or in the factors that are given in the tragedy. Now, another interesting fact about Sophocles is that his uses of irony and bitterness, unlike Euripides, led him to the other way, to fix on the disintegration of the individual. See, the individual seems to be most important fact or most important person in any tragedy. So for Sophocles is in our concern. So for Sophocles is here to understand or to be understood. He is sincerely different than Aeschylus and Euripides. So whereas both Aeschylus and Euripides thought more about their characters, they are more probing into their characters. It means whenever you read a tragedy of both Aeschylus and Euripides, you can find that the dramatist has an opinion in the characters. The characters are acting according to the dramatists. So the dramatists are actually in revolving those characters into the play. So what happens for Sophocles? Sophocles was completely different here. So he sets them free on a course seemingly on their own choosing. So it was their choice. It was completely their own ideas, and they were having that with them. So he was not moving forward to the next clip. So here is the Oedipus the king, about Oedipus. So here is the Oedipus the king, Oedipus Rex, or the King Oedipus. Sophocles' greatest play may serve as a model of his total dramatic achievement. Embodied in it and suggested with extraordinary dramatic tact are all the basic questions of tragedy, which are presented in such a way as almost to define the form itself. It is not surprising that Aristotle, a century later, analyzed it for his definition of tragedy, and about this segment we will come to the latter part of this slide. In the Poetics. So, about Oedipus the king, Oedipus is supposed to be the best tragedy written ever. Supposed to be. It is not inevitably the best. However, it is supposed to be the best, and because for this reason, Aristotle took Oedipus the king, or King Oedipus, or Oedipus Rex, as his definition of tragedy. It provides, that means the tragedy provides the basic examples or basic materials for Aristotle's theory regarding tragedy, as he expressed in his The Poetics. It is the new clear Greek tragedy, setting the norm in a way that cannot be claimed for any other work, not even the Oresteia. So it is even better than Aristotelian trilogy. The dramas in Oresteia, for example, Agamemnon, Kiphae, or Eumenides, Oedipus Rex is supposed to be the best one written ever by Sophocles. So here comes again Euripides, the third dramatist. After Aeschylus, Sophocles, there is Euripides. Euripides is the dark tragedian. Euripides, the dark tragedian. Euripides' famous plays are Hippolytus, Medea, and Baccha. The tragedies of Euripides present in grueling detail the wreck of human lives under the stresses that the gods often seem willfully to place upon them. So, most significant of Euripides' plays is Medea, where the cruelty of a mother is shown. However, the details of the wreck of human lives under the stresses that the gods often seem willfully to place upon them, it is clear, it is evident from Euripides' plays that it is the human nature that even gods seem willfully to place upon them. It is the ways, it is the mandatory factors, it is their fate that is decided previously by the gods. So Euripides' plays present these ideas. In Euripides, the gods are destructive, wreaking their capricious wills. Capricious is not fixed, anything temporary, not stable, that is capricious. Someone's mentality is capricious, that means he or she is not stable from his or her mentality. So capricious wills on the defenseless. Aristotle called Euripides the most tragic of the three dramatists. Surely his depiction of the arena of human life is the grimmest. So although Aristotle believed that Euripides was the significant and most tragic of all these three dramatists, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And about the later Greek drama, after Euripides, Greek drama reveals little that is significant to the history of tragedy. Performances continued to be given in the theatres throughout the Mediterranean world, but with the decline of Athens as a city-state, the tradition of tragedy eroded. As external affairs deteriorated, the high idealism, the exalted sense of human capacities depicted in the tragedy at its height, yielded more and more to the complaints of the skeptics. What it means that after Euripides, after the Greek tragedians, the Greek dramas were not that important, or there were not much valid materials found. And because the decline of Athens as a city-state, this one is also another significant reason why dramas were not revealing their best features, like Aeschylean, like Sophocles, or like Euripides' tragedies reveal. So as external affairs deteriorated, the high idealism, external affairs means external works, deteriorated means it declines. The high idealism is another reason. The exalted sense of human capacity is depicted in tragedy. So maybe human beings are more sensible, more dangerous, more powerful than gods and goddesses. They possess their own destiny. So character is destiny, another term that is revealed later on by Shakespeare and Shakespearean tragedies. In Shakespearean tragedies we find character became their own masters, so they were not dependent on the fate, as the Greek tragedians created the characters who were dependent on their fate. Gods and goddesses have larger impact upon them. So the sense of human capacity is depicted in tragedy at its height, yielded more and more to the complaints of the skeptics. So skeptics complain regarding all this. So naturally it was no more the charm of the gods and goddesses upon the characters. The characters were no more helpless. The characters can make their decisions, they can build their ways, and because of these reasons later Greek drama were in decline. Now it is time to focus finally on Aristotle's concept of tragedy as expressed in the Poetics, because this is the time when, after understanding the concepts of tragedy, its origin and development, and about the tragedians, we must understand the concept of tragedy as expressed by famous Aristotle in his famous The Poetics. So here is the definition of tragedy translated by Ingram Bywater. There are a lot of translations we can find, but Ingram Bywater's translation is by far the best one. So here is the description or the definition of tragedy. A tragedy then is the imitation of an action. Now I am requesting you to follow the black colored words or phrases, and these words and phrases are important in this description. So a tragedy then is the imitation of an action that is serious and also as having magnitude, complete in itself, in language with pleasurable accessories, each kind brought in separately in the parts of the work in a dramatic, not in a narrative form, with incidents arousing pity and fear. So this pity and fear, although it is not in black color, however these are also significant, pity and fear, were it to accomplish its catharsis of such emotions. This catharsis again significant. So these are the words and phrases which are significant in the definition. So now let us move to the part by part discussion of this definition. So here is the explanation of the definition. So first comes imitation of an action that is serious. All art is a representation, that means the imitation of life, but none can represent life in its totality. Therefore an artist has to be selective in representation. These words are not very difficult to understand, so you can understand what is said here. Therefore an artist has to be selective in representation. So artist cannot represent everything going on in life. He must aim at representing or imitating an aspect of life or a fragment of life, so it's not in totality. Action comprises all human activities including deeds, thoughts and feelings. Therefore we find soliloquies, choruses, etc. in tragedy. So imitation of an action that is serious. Now imitation of an action, you can understand that imitation suggests the representation, and of an action, that means what is going on, all human activities, because action comprises all human activities including deeds, thoughts and feelings. And in order to express these deeds, thoughts and feelings, there are soliloquies, choruses and something like that in the tragedies. Now what about its seriousness? The writer of tragedy seeks to imitate the serious side of life, just as the writer of comedy seeks to imitate only the shallow and superficial side. The tragic section presented on the stage in a drama should be complete or self-contained, with a proper beginning, proper middle. So it is again another interesting part to understand. Now let us move back to the earlier part here. Self-contained with a proper beginning, proper middle and obviously a proper end. So the tragedy, whatever be the subject, it has to be serious. Just like now here, there is a comparison with comedy, because comedy focuses on shallow and superficial side of life, and tragedy basically deals with life's seriousness. So naturally, whatever be the imitation, whatever be the action, that has to be serious in every part. Now again, what is then magnitude? The play must have then a definite magnitude, a proper size, or a reasonable length such as the mind may comprehend fully. That is to say that it must have only necessary duration. It should not neither be too long to tire our patience, nor too short to make effective representation impossible. Besides, a drama continuing for hours indefinitely may fail to keep the various parts of it together into unity and wholeness in the spectator's mind. The reasonable duration enables the spectator to view the drama as a whole, to remember its various episodes, and to maintain interest. So what is significant here? Magnitude suggests the length of the drama. It must not be too long, it must not be too short. So if it will be too long, then the readers or the spectators will lose their interest in the tragedy, whatever they are viewing. And if it is too short, then the whole parts can never be presentable or can never be presented in the small arena, small parts of the tragedy. So it has to get the specific length. So a tragedy has to maintain a specific length so that every material, every concerning ideas must be put together in a tragedy. So here comes the complete in itself, the concept of complete in itself. A beginning is that before which the audience or the reader does not need. Before it starts here, let me clarify this complete in itself. Complete means it has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. So a tragedy must possess a beginning and a middle and an end. Therefore, the tragedy must be complete, so complete in itself. Now, a beginning is that before which the audience or the reader does not need to be told anything to understand the story. If something more is required to understand the story than the beginning gives, it is unsatisfactory. From it follows the middle. In their turn, the events from the middle lead to the end. Thus, the story becomes a compact and self-sufficient one. It must not leave the impression that even after the end, the action is still to be continued, or that before the action starts, certain things remain to be known. What it means that a proper beginning is this, that at the beginning the spectators will not get enough information about the tragedy, because it has to follow to the middle. Once you get to the middle, the spectators or you as spectator will get to know about the end, because eventually you will be leading towards the end, and the basic factors of the tragedy, the basic aroma of the tragedy, the very essence of the tragedy will lead you to the end. Naturally, a beginning must not give you the whole information. In the middle, you will not feel unsatisfactory, and when the end arrives, when the end reaches to the point, then you will get the satisfaction completely. So eventually, a tragedy has to be complete in itself. It has to possess a beginning, proper beginning. It has to be through the middle. It has to possess a middle, and eventually, finally, an end, to get the satisfaction, to give the satisfaction to the readers, to the spectators. So it must not leave the impression that even after the end of the action is still to be continued. So the spectators will not get this kind of impression. Still there is something. After the end, the tragedy is finally complete. Spectators must not think that there is still something we need to understand, or I need to understand. So, or that before the action starts, certain things remain to be known. Now here comes the point of language. The language employed here should be duly embellished and beautified with various artistic ornaments. And what are these artistic ornaments? Rhythm, harmony, song, etc. And figures of speech, not to forget. So figures of speech we can understand simile, metaphor, etc. These are called figures of speech. The language of our daily affairs is not useful here, because tragedy has to present a heightened picture of life's serious side. So colloquialism, that means the colloquial language, the language that we usually use in our daily lives, those should not be presented in the tragedy, because in a tragedy one must follow the heightened picture of life's serious side. Naturally, that is possible only if elevated language of poetry is used. According to need, the writer makes use of songs, poetry, poetic dialogue, simple conversation, etc. is various parts of the play. So this is the point of language. Now it's in dramatic form, not in narrative form. Its manner of imitation should be action, not narration, as in epic, for it is meant to be a dramatic representation on the stage and not a mere storytelling. So there lies the basic difference between a narration and an dramatic form. In narration you will get simple description, but in dramatic form you will get conversational mode. People are conversing with each other. There are characters who are conversing with each other. Naturally, these conversations give you the utmost effect, the utmost side of your life. So whatever be the representation, only dramatic form can possess that seriousness, can continue that seriousness, what is very necessary for tragedy. Now here comes the last part, the pity, fear and catharsis. Now let me first read this segment, then I am going to explain it. Then, for the function or aim of tragedy is to shake up in the soul the impulses of pity and fear, to achieve what he calls catharsis. The emotions of pity and fear find a full and free outlet in tragedy. Their excess is purged and we are lifted out of ourselves and emerges nobler than before. Now here find out what it is said. What is then pity and fear, and finally catharsis? We can understand that this catharsis comes because it is the excess of pity and fear finally purged into and we are lifted out of ourselves. That means we are getting out of the vision that just being presented in a tragedy. Now why then pity and fear? Pity because we pity the protagonist, because if such a nobler person, now this is something else, this is I am talking about Aristotle's concept of hero, because in that concept Aristotle describes in the Poetics that hero must not be too good, must not be too bad, but he must be more than the average. So in every tragedy, in Shakespearean tragedy, in Greek tragedies, the heroes are either a noble person or a king or someone who is richer, not a very ordinary person. So then we can understand that this pity comes when we can think, or when we usually think, that if such thing happens or may happen with this elevated person, this is really self-sufficient, this is really very pitiful affair. So here lies the pity. Pity comes the emotion, through the emotion, and the emotion comes because of the character, that such elevated character is ultimately doomed. And fear comes because that if such thing or such idea or such happening may happen to this person, the person who is not an average person, who is not a common man, what about us, we the common people, what about us? So there lies the fear. This is the combination of pity and fear, and it becomes the excess when it gets to the ultimate higher level, the both pity and fear. We are purged, we are purified, and this is called catharsis. This is not very easy concept for detail. In order to understand the detailed conceptions about this pity and fear and catharsis, you need to study a lot more, and in this short framework I cannot make it clear here. However, I will give you, or I will provide you the informations about this. I will give you URLs where you can get the full informations regarding this. Now this is another interesting fact, important as well, that why Aristotle had adopted this theory. Now let me read out this passage, then you can understand. It should be remembered that Plato, his master, had attacked poetry in general, including tragedy, from moral and philosophical points of view. So Aristotle had to defend poetry against his master's attack on the moral and philosophical grounds. He has to refute Plato's charges. To quote Aeschylus, poetry, said Plato, makes men cowardly by its picture of the afterworld. No, replies Aristotle, it can purge men's fears. Poetry, said Plato, encourages men to be hysterical and uncontrolled, not historical. It's hysteria. From hysteria, it is hysterical and uncontrolled. On the contrary, answers is pupil. Pupil means student. Student means Aristotle. It makes them less, not more, emotional by giving a periodic, healthy outlet to their feelings. In short, Aristotle's definition of tragedy is half a defense. But it is only half a defense, that is to say, the other half of the theory is possibly the result of a serious analytical inquiry of Aristotle's into the nature of tragic delight and its psychological effects. His catharsis forms the most important part of his concept of tragedy as a positive, not pessimistic drama which leaves wholesome effect, not mere disturbance in the minds of the spectators. So what we get here, Aristotle's The Poetics is an example, is a reply to Plato's ideas, and there are two ideas quoting Aeschylus. Aeschylus was another renowned critic who said these ideas and regarding the differences between Plato and Aristotle. There are 2 points given by Aeschylus. One is that poetry makes men cowardly by its picture of the afterworld. Aristotle's side was no, it can purge men's fears. Again, poetry, according to Plato, encourages men to be hysterical and uncontrolled. It begets licentiousness. On the contrary, Aristotle says it makes them less, more emotional by giving a periodic, healthy outlet to their feelings. That is the catharsis. So it is the purgation. It is the purification of mind. Contrarily, in the contrary position of Plato, Aristotle gives this idea that tragedy or poetry basically purifies the human mind. It doesn't get excess of emotion towards the spectators. The people who are watching these tragedies, they can feel better only after the catharsis happens, only after their minds are purgated, purified. Now here, before going into the next slide, let us discuss once more again about this. So Aristotle's tragedy, the concept of tragedy and poetics specifically, is a defense against Plato's attack on the Republic. Now, about the text that we are looking forward, Oedipus Rex. Now here is a very short summary about Oedipus Rex. Now you can read it out. I am not here going to read it out, or you can pause the video, you can see what is written here, because this is a very short summary. If I have to write down a full summary, it will take several slides. So this is not going to I am not going to do this here again. So after reading this, pause the video and then just read out whatever is here written about the short summary regarding Oedipus Rex. Now again here, Oedipus Rex, a perfect Aristotelian tragedy. Why Oedipus Rex is called a perfect Aristotelian tragedy? This is important. Why important? Because Oedipus Rex is supposed to be the perfect Aristotelian tragedy. Why? It has a perfect plot. That means it has a perfect beginning, middle and an end, and it also follows the rule of time, place and action. 3 unities. It is called 3 unities, and this you will understand later on, because in this slide, in this video, I am only going to express what is tragedy, why Aristotle wrote Poetics, and what is tragedy according to Aristotle, and very basic few ideas regarding your Oedipus Rex. So the tragic hero Oedipus has a Marcia and a hubris. Now don't be panicked, because these terms and terminologies are available in these URLs. Once you click these URLs, you can directly go to the your websites, and there you can read whatever you want to know. Further on in the next video, hopefully I can make it clear what are these called, and in reference to Oedipus Rex. So first you have to understand what is Oedipus Rex, then you need to understand how these terminologies are working in that. Hamartia is the error of judgment. Hubris is a fatal flaw. Anagnorisis and peripeteia are also noticed in the play. Anagnorisis is the discovery, peripeteia is reversal of fortune. So these are the concepts are also found in Oedipus Rex, and that is the reason why Aristotle chose very wisely, sagaciously, Oedipus Rex as is one of the significant and brilliant example of tragedy. Now in the next video, hopefully I am going to explain these things, but before that, if you have any problems regarding these concepts from the beginning to the end, from the beginning means from the birth of tragedy, how tragedy comes into the idea, comes into existence, and till to this point that about Oedipus Rex, if you have any problem, you can ask me, you can comment on that, you can also ask me directly. So this is not about anything that you don't understand. You will definitely understand, and furthermore, if you need to understand more, you can go in these URLs, so you can also click these URLs and you can find whatever you want. So up to this, it's okay. If you have any problems, just let me know.